What's the more challenging team to coach, a contender or an up-and-coming team?
Well, I've had both. I'm gonna the up-and-coming team. You know, the contenders usually are self-motivated. You know, they usually have guys that are ready to win. You know, we won in Boston because we had terrific players, but we also, you know, it was the right time for them to win. You know, Paul and Ray and Kevin at that point in their careers had everything except for a title. So they were ready to win. And, you know, as Tibbs know, if you can coach a Kevin Garnett, like every coach should have that opportunity, really. I mean, he's the greatest culture, you know, leader I've ever been around. So it made it easier with young guys, especially a young team. And that's what Terry, you look at the team job he did. It's tough to get young guys to buy into anything because they're competing against each other half the time. And so I think a young team is much harder to coach.
Do your battles early on them, all right? Don't concede anything. Make them pay for it at the other end.
You know, obviously this last year was a joy from a coaching standpoint with a young team, and they showed progress. We didn't have to go through the losing that a lot of times when you have a younger team, you don't get the wins. But you know, I was an assistant. Dwayne and I were assistants in Seattle together, and you know, one year we won 63 games, and the next year we won 57, and we were miserable. I've always said this, too. There's not an easy job in the league. No matter if you got a 60-win team or a 20-win team, young or old or whatever, there is no easy job in this league. One is not easier or more difficult than the other. It's just different.
Can it be more fun with a young team if you see progress, even if you know going in you're not going to be a contender or even a playoff team?
I think, Matt, the main thing with the young team are expectations. You can have a young team and there are no expectations, then it's fun. But if there's expectation and you're young, that's a recipe for a problem. And like Terry said, a young team, and I think Doc said it, a young team is more challenging because they don't have a reference point. When you talk about something, it's from scratch. Whereas an older team, they've been there before, they've seen it, they've heard it before somewhere else, and it's just a matter of directing them in the right direction.
And the roles, like with a young team, like the one thing Terry had was, you know, literally was the best player.
Right.
And I think that helps when you have a young team. I think if you're really struggling when there's no clear best favorite player, because now they're all competing.
And they all think they're the best.
They all. You know, I had a team in Boston with Al Jefferson. You know, it's when they're all young, and you know, we decided we're going to go to Al every time with Perk. You know, he was like, well, what about me? You know, but that's what at that time, they're all even. And when you have a group of guys that are even, you want players to separate.
But what about your team in Orlando? I mean, you had a young team, and you got Coach of the Year because you coached the heck out of
my favorite team.
Right.
You know, because they were kind of young, some of them, but they were bulldogs. You know, I just happened to have a group of guys that just played hard every night. You know, we didn't have a lot of talent on that team, but that was a fun team. I told Tibbs, they were fun to coach until the last play of the game. When no one's looking at you, like, come on, somebody look at me so I can get you the ball. You know, they were good until then. But that's true. That was a joy.
But you know, we've always said playing hard is a talent.
It's a skill.
Very underrated talent.
It's a skill that people don't understand. There's certain players that play hard every night, and that is a skill.
Yes, it is.
When you're coaching a really young group, how different is your day-to-day job when you've got to teach, not just worry about game plans for that night?
Well, it's going to be about the same, but just because every team has young guys that you're teaching. I mean, the older guys, they know, but they need to be coached and taught also. And so it doesn't change that much. It's just a little bit more frustrating with the younger guys. You know, it's like you said, you're going to one guy and everybody else thinks they should be going to. I don't get my touches. I don't know how many times you heard that. It's a bad saying. And that's the challenging thing about a young team. But as soon as you establish a leader, it's a lot easier.
To do this job, you guys have to be able to work with people, lots of different kinds of people, obviously. But with any job and any employee, you're not going to relate perfectly to everybody you work with. You're not going to have a rapport instantly with any of your players. What kind of a challenge is that when you just can't reach a guy?
Well, I think you have to study your team, and there's different things that make people go, and try to find an understanding for that. I think each year you're faced with new and different challenges, and sometimes it's with the same team. In Boston, in 08, it was unbelievable every day. And I beg to differ with you. You had I think that was your favorite
That was
team.
my favorite team. that was it.
I noticed you had some fun that year. And so it was a great group, and the timing was right. And then I think that group they weren't going to allow us to miss that opportunity. And so it was every day there was great order, and you were getting everything they had each and every day. And then when I went to Chicago, we had a young Derrick Rose and a young Joakim Noah, and they were real hungry. They wanted to get there, and they were driving the team.
Joe, very good. Very good. Very good.
And so that was a lot of fun. So I think it's having the right people and then recognizing the challenges that you have each year. Like in 2008, we had an unbelievable team, and then in 2010, it was basically the same team, but it was challenging all the way until the end of the season. And one of the best things that happened that year, we were really struggling down the stretch, and we get beat pretty badly in L.A., and this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So Doc goes into the locker room after the game, and he's telling everybody we're going to the finals. I'm saying, are you nuts? So he asks everyone in the room for $100. He puts it in an envelope. He sticks it up in the ceiling. He said, we're going to come back here in the finals, and we're going to get that money. And sure enough, and it was the same team, and we struggled all year, but we found our way at the end. And unfortunately, we fell short in Game 7, and we still haven't gotten over it. But
You sure haven't. You never will.
You started with the 08 thing, you made him feel good, and you brought it back. And